I'm outraged that prosecutors at the Justice Department were tricked into starting this investigation 3 years ago with false allegations by those who have a political motive to silence me. But I will not be silenced.
That, of course, Senator Menendez expressing his true displeasure with the indictments that we learned about this week. We're going to get into his reaction and how that might affect what's going on in this Iranian deal by talking with David Drucker, the senior congressional correspondent over at the Washington Examiner, also a former staff writer at rollcall.com. David, welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So let's start off with Senator Menendez. He is obviously not happy about all this. He is trying to persuade anyone who will listen that this is a political vendetta. The question I have to ask you, as he himself noted in his comments, this did begin 3 years ago, which I believe was well before the president announced his opening up to Cuba, which Menendez has a problem with, and now the Iranian deal, which Senator Menendez is also not very happy with. Do you think this is politically motivated?
Well, look, I mean, anything that comes out of any Justice Department has a little bit of politics in it because the Attorney General is a political appointee and the AG's office is controlled by the President, who is a political actor. But, you know, I think if you look at the indictment that goes after Menendez, it's pretty damning. Maybe he's innocent. He is obviously innocent until proven guilty in our system. But this doesn't look to be that thin. On the other hand, the timing that the Justice Department used to bring forth the indictment was really curious because Bob Menendez has been one of the most outspoken Democratic critics of the president's Iran negotiations, and now, you know, what we've seen is the framework for a possible deal. And so it's made opponents of the president's strategy in Iran very nervous because you lose a very credible, prominent Democratic critic of the president just at a time when that individual would be most necessary in the debate.
Just to follow that up, and then I know Betsy has some things she wants to ask you. You know, when this was a grand jury investigation that was taking place in Newark. Grand juries finish when they finish. That's why it seems odd to me to suggest that there was a political element to the timing of the indictment. You get the indictment when you get the indictment. True?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that if you look at the breadth of this indictment and the fact that Republicans have been after Menendez for years, suggesting that he was corrupt, it's hard to argue with. But in Washington, where everything's politicized, the coincidence of the timing was not lost on all of the Republicans who have been trying to put together a bipartisan, veto-proof majority to have an opportunity, at the very least, to nullify the president's Iran negotiations.
Well, David, on this issue of timing, it's no coincidence, perhaps, that the Justice Department chose not to go after IRS Lois Lerner. Can you comment on that decision?
Well, that's one of the things that makes this curious, right? Because Lois Lerner, in theory, could have been indicted on charges of either perjury or not doing what she was supposed to do per an order from Congress, which has the legal ability to subpoena and compel.
Wouldn't that have been a slam dunk?
No.
Well, I'll leave that to the legal scholars and analysts. What I will tell you is that it does definitely speak to your point, and to my larger point that you can never completely divorce politics from any of this, because Lois Lerner was clearly a major player in the IRS targeting of conservative groups. Everybody knows, even if you think that Republicans have made a bigger deal of this than was necessary, everybody knows the IRS was singling out and targeting conservative groups and trying to cause them problems because they were opposed to the Obama administration's agenda. Everybody knows that. Lois Lerner was a central figure in that until leaving her alone.
David, because there's not much time left and we got a few more things to get to, I do want to just make sure we're clear on one thing. The Lois Lerner issue centered around whether or not she had blown her Fifth Amendment right to remain silent because she gave an opening speech where she basically declared her innocence. Isn't that what this issue was? There may be other things where they may still charge Lois Lerner, but isn't that what this particular issue was about?
Primarily, yes,
okay.
But it spoke to the larger issue, and that's why I brought it up.
So just very quickly, because time is short, I know you're in touch with everybody up on the Hill. Are you able to talk to anybody today that I know they're on vacation regarding the Iranian deal, just quickly?
Everything I've seen has everybody in their usual camps.
Right.
The don't like it, even though some are a little bit measured. Democrats are softening, as I predicted. And I don't think you'll see a veto-proof majority for the Corker-Menendez bill to force the president to send this to Congress.
Got it. David, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to let you go because we got to move on. We'll have you back soon, man. You're very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, but have a good holiday. Coming up next, host of the Daily Wrap weeknights at 6 p.m. Eastern. I think I've heard of that show. Joe Concha will join us, but first, the Revolutionary War was effectively over when British General Charles Cornwallis surrendered to the French and American forces in 1781. We're going to take a look back now at this hour's American moment. Fascinating piece of history. You want to stay tuned and watch this. You'll learn something.
Exactly 6 years and 6 months after the first shots of the Revolutionary War were fired at Lexington and Concord, General George Washington had spent most of the war evading fixed battles against the superior armed British forces. But Providence intervened. Lieutenant General Lord Cornwallis, commander of British forces in Virginia and second in command of all British forces in the American colonies, had moved into a trap, setting up camp in Yorktown. Located on a peninsula and facing the York River, Cornwallis was easily encircled by Continental Army troops on one side and a powerful French fleet on another. On October 6th, Washington's army, now reinforced with 5,500 French troops, were making preparations for their planned assault on the 9th. At the same time, a French fleet, numbering 28 ships of the line, had prevented any chance of a British escape by water. By mid-month, the British were cut off from their supply lines, denying them much-needed food and ammunition. With his forces suffering heavy casualties from Washington's continual artillery bombardment, and knowing his reinforcements were still weeks away, Lord Cornwallis did the unthinkable. He surrendered his forces to what had been called a band of rabble, effectively ending America's war for independence. The date was the 19th of October, 1781. With the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783, the war officially came to a close, with America's sovereignty secured and its territories bordered by Canada to the north, Florida to the south, and the Mississippi River to the east. For Newsmax TV, I'm Bill Curtis, and this is an American moment.